The biggest decision you're going to make when it comes to developing in the AI world is deciding between going with a private model or an open source model. Whether you're building small tools that are just leveraging parts of a large language model, or you're building entire platforms that are going to transform industries, this decision is key, and it can save you time, money, and potential headaches down the road. What's up, everybody? Today, we're going to jump into the difference between private large language models and open source large language models. We're going to just cover some basic concepts so that we're on the same page and understand exactly why this decision is so important and how it can affect your development cycle, your business, and just overall how you spend and the amount of time that you have to put in effort into building something that can scale and eventually grow. If you're new to the channel, if you're checking us out for the first time, I'm Nelson and I'm here on Bagverse. And on this channel, we touch on topics ranging from software development to AI development to trends in the tech space, how to get started, how can we help small businesses, the type of clients that we work for. So definitely like, follow, and subscribe if you want to see a lot of content like this, and definitely come along this journey with us. So let's get into it. So when we think private, think of large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, any service that you see that you can interact with a large language model and you don't have to worry about the infrastructure. You can just jump right in and start either interacting with it or interacting with their API. This is a private model. So the key benefits here are, like we said, they manage the infrastructure for you. They make sure that it's always up and that you can interact with it. They train the data. They ensure that the model is updated and well kept. You just have to pay either a monthly fee or some type of access fee so that you can access the model. And they also give you a lot of added benefits of API capabilities, chat capabilities, the ability to kind of rate limit. So you don't have to worry about the ins and outs of the model. You just get the benefit from using it. Now, this is very convenient if you want to just get going with large language models and understanding how you could develop on top of it, or you just want to start using AI. This is a great way to get started and you don't have to worry about the ins and outs of it. You can just start uploading data and getting the leverage and the power of AI. So on the other hand, we have open source. So open source are things such as Llama, BERT, DeepSeek. So when we say open source, you are essentially getting provided with the code that determines how the model will perform. And it's your responsibility to train that model on data, have the data sets. It's your responsibility to launch that model in a service that you can now have access to it when you need it. It's your responsibility to build APIs on top of it, make sure it's secure, make sure it's up to date. So when you think open source, you now have way more control over the model itself. You have control over the data that's going to be trained on, the parameters, which means essentially like how it's going to react to different biases and how it's going to handle the data that you train it on and what type of patterns it should and should not be aware of. So when you think open source, think of you have way more control there and you now get to determine how this model is going to react. The development of the model is community driven. So if you look at Llama, we are now on Llama 3.2. You'll see different versions that get deployed that you can now take in. You'll have to retrain that new model on this new data, make the changes to it that you would like, change the parameters, change the tokens that are being used in it, and then deploy it. So again, a lot of flexibility there and the ability to kind of like control, but you are going to be responsible for the inner makings of that model. Let's look at one key factor. And one of those biggest things is privacy. Now, when you're dealing with a private large language model, your data is passing through third-party servers that you don't own. And while OpenAI and Anthropic definitely put in the measures to have security, some cases require that that data is isolated and it never goes on other servers. Whereas if you go with open source, like we said, everything is hosted and the infrastructure is owned by you. So you have control of your data, when it's used, how it's used, what servers it will have access to it. So let's walk through some of the situations where, these two differences matter. Now, if you're looking at something like health data that you're a company and you manage, you can't have that data be processed through third-party servers. There's a lot of cleaning that has to happen. There's a lot of sensitive data on there that you have to be aware of what servers are touching that. You have to ensure that you have a paper trail of that. You have to ensure that these servers are secure. So you most likely can't go with that route to get a full in-depth processing of your data. Whereas on the other hand, if you're a health company and you go open source, you now can take the full data set that you have because everything is hosted on your same servers, and you can really harness the power of this. So this is really one of the benefits when it comes to open source. You have the capabilities to really build something that's bespoke and custom for your particular industry, and you can assure your end clients that the data stays secure on your servers and that it doesn't go anywhere else. Now, this is when things get interesting. So while it might seem really appeasing to own that data and own the infrastructure, do you have the power to run the model and make sure that it's going to be stable? So let's look at the differences. When it comes to private, companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, they have the horsepower to ensure that the model is always up. It has the GPUs to process all of these requests that are coming in, and it has the infrastructure to make sure that it can scale. So these things are really important when it comes to artificial intelligence, when it comes to large language models, when it comes to powering what it takes for these models to make the requests and keep the context windows larger and all these things that come along with the ride. So while you might see a lot of benefits with open source, the cost that it takes for you to host this model, ensure that it's up, ensure that it's stable, really outweighs the cost that when you come to using one of these private models, because they've made that investment and they have the large scale there. So that's why you're seeing companies that have large investments and they're willing to dump a lot of money into the infrastructure because they know that at scale, they'll be able to beat out anyone trying to host their own large language models and host their own services. Something else you have to take into consideration when it comes to private and open source is the maintenance. Now, when it comes to, again, these larger companies that have the resources, they have different departments within their company that are going to ensure that the servers are up, the rack space is there, the GPUs are powerful, they can upgrade when they need, compared to you as either a one-off company or a small business or even a part-time developer or full-time developer. You just don't have the resources. And even if you try to run this on your own servers at your house, you're going to need more and more juice to really make sure that you can get this done. So that's really the trade-off when you're looking at open source and private when it comes to optimizing in the infrastructure. So if we look at these from real practical use cases, we can say that on a privacy side, I think open source has the edge there because you can keep the data in-house and you don't have to have it go to different servers. When we look at it from a custom domain space, I can say open source has the edge there because, again, you have more control over how that model was trained and what data was trained on. So you have more control on how the model will react. When we look at it from terms of getting an MVP and a quick product out there, private probably has the edge there because the infrastructure is in place. You can just plug and play and start banging away. When it also comes to scaling, private has the edge there as well because they have the resources, the GPU, the infrastructure to ensure that the application can scale and it can take on whatever kind of load you're expecting to take on. And if you have a limited budget, this really depends on what's important to you and what matters. So on a limited budget and data is really important to you, then you probably go open source. But if you're on limited budget and data privacy isn't that big for you, then you probably go with private. So this is something that depends, and you got to really look at your situation and see which play makes sense for you. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to consider when it comes to if you want to use a private large language model compared to an open source. The fact that we have these options is amazing. And as a developer, as a business, as people that are getting to this space, you really want to weigh the odds between the two and really determine what's important to you. Thanks for jumping in. We hope you enjoyed this content. If you like this type of content, like, follow, and subscribe. And leave some comments below on what your experience has been when it comes to compared to using a private large language model, using open source. How has your development process been? If you're a small business looking to understand how can you harness some of those things, leave a comment below, reach out. We would love to talk to you and communicate. Until next time, peace.